but we're going to start with the special meeting of the Park District Board of Commissioners, which I call to order at 6:04 p.m. Brian, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein?
Here.
Commissioner Gressberg? Here. Commissioner Flores-Weiskopf is absent. Vice President Ruttenberg?
I'm here.
And President Kaplan is absent.
All right. We are having a special meeting for some limited purposes that are basically administrative, but if anybody cares to address the board, we are going to have our regular meeting immediately after this. Sir?
Here, there.
The microphone would help.
Hi, thank you. My name is Laurent Pernod. I live here in Highland Park. I saw in the news recently that we are faced with the necessity of replacing some of the sand at Rosewood Beach, and I wanted to raise a point that if feasible and if economically advisable, we might want to consider using slightly different sand that we use when we put the beach together. This is a ultimate 1% problem, I realize, but all up and down the North Shore, all the beaches are very fine sand. Ours at Rosewood is rough, very dusty sand. When the children play in it, they're covered in dust from head to toe, and if you're hanging out at the beach on a summer day, you'll just see big clouds of dust coming up. So it's definitely not a problem that should be fixed if there wasn't another reason to. But again, if economically feasible, if we're going to be replacing some sand or bringing some sand in, and if it's doable, I would advise we look at different sand and look at beaches from Lake Forest to Chicago, which have all much superior sand.
Thank you. Those points are very valid, and they're going to be a topic of the discussion that we're going to have in the regular session, which follows immediately after this.
Yes.
So, but thank you.
We're going to talk a lot about that really shortly.
We will.
Okay.
We're going to move into, unless there's anybody else on this topic, no. Ordinance 19-03, appointment of interim executive director, which is there a motion to approve ordinance 19-03, appointment of Kathy Donahue as the interim executive director?
Before we do that, just since we have people here today that we are the executive director for the Park District retired as of February 28th, and so we're in the process of interviewing her replacement. But in the meantime, we are lucky to have Kathy Donahue, who is willing to step up and be the interim executive director until such time as we replace the outgoing executive director, Liza McElroy. So with that, I move that we approve Kathy as the interim executive director.
I second it.
All right. Is there any discussion on the motion? If none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Bernstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Gressberg? Aye. Commissioner Flores-Weiskopf is absent. Vice President Ruttenberg?
Aye.
And President Kaplan is absent.
Well, the motion's... And another housekeeping, appointment of the secretary to the Park District of Highland Park Board of Commissioners, which will be, in this case, it says Kathleen Donahue. Is there a motion to appoint Kathy Donahue as the secretary of the Park District of Highland Park Board of Commissioners?
So moved.
Second.
All right, please call the roll.
Commissioner Bernstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Flores-Weiskopf is absent. Commissioner Gressberg? Aye. Commissioner Ruttenberg?
Aye.
And President Kaplan is
The
absent.
motion is approved. Is there a motion to adjourn the special meeting of the Park District Board of Commissioners?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
And we call the meeting adjourned at 6:08 p.m.
Aye.
Yeah. We're doing a speed dial. All right. So we're going to, I think we could start should we start the regular
Yeah.
session now?
Let's go.
Kathy, do you have a cheat sheet? Yeah, here. Shouldn't have called it a cheat sheet. Here we go. All right. All right, so now we're going to move into our regular meeting agenda that has quite a full agenda. And so I call to order the workshop meeting of the Park District of Highland Park at 6:09 p.m. on March 12th. Brian, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bernstein?
Here.
Commissioner Flores-Weiskopf is absent. Commissioner Grossberg?
Here.
Vice President Ruttenberg?
Here.
and President Kaplan is absent.
Good, we have a quorum, thank you. Are there any additions to the agenda? I have requested one addition to the agenda. If the commissioners are acceptable, I'd like to get a report about the last community park meeting that was held for the community park at the recreation center. This might be a good time to do it then, Madam Executive Director.
Amalia's going to come up and give that report.
It's a long walk. Good evening. So I can provide an update on that meeting. We had, I want to say, about 12 advisory committee members attend the advisory committee meeting on March 5th, at which point Hay and Associates, who's the engineering firm working on the design plans for the community park at the recreation center, presented the design development set. So this was the third meeting of the series of advisory committee meetings, and it really brought together all of the feedback that we've heard from our advisory committee at the first two meetings and from the public workshop that we had and from the board showing the design development set. And I have to apologize, Rebecca Grill is the one that would probably be best to answer the questions, but I'm happy to answer any other questions about the meeting.
Well, I think the general consensus from the advisory committee, we have members here, is that the community park plans are moving along in a very, very positive nature. We have a nod of the head to agree. Would you agree? And there's a lot of excitement about what the project is going to wind up.
Absolutely. And I think everyone in the meeting and everyone agrees that it was a great way the plans really bring together all the thoughts and ideas that we heard throughout the engagement process.
I just felt it was appropriate to have
Thank
a
you.
thumbnail.
Yeah, we're excited and we're moving along.
And since you're standing up there already, the next item is the attitude and interest survey.
Yes, another exciting project that we are embarking on. So I'm here tonight to recommend that the district enter into an agreement with Acuity Research to conduct the Community Attitude and Interest Survey. So I'm just going to take a step back and, for the audience, explain the Attitude and Interest Survey is a community needs assessment. So it's administered as a survey, essentially. It's statistically valid, and that means that we define the extent to which the conclusions drawn from the survey are reliable. So a little bit of background as to how we got here. So the most recent surveys that we have conducted were in 2009. We also conducted a survey in 2013 as part of the Greenprint master planning effort. District policy is to conduct a community needs assessment every 3 to 6 years. And as part of the distinguished accreditation requirement, we are to complete a statistically valid survey every 10 years. So the why. Why are we doing this? So the district, plans are living documents, and we did our Greenprint master plan back in 2015. And so it is best practice to evaluate our plans, and this is a good time. We're halfway through. We're about 5 years into Greenprint. And this is an opportunity to meet district policy and then also assess the community needs to get a pulse on the community to prioritize the district's efforts to best meet the community needs, the current community needs. So on February 15th, we issued a request for proposals. We received 7 proposals on March 1st. Staff reviewed those 7 proposals using an evaluation form looking at qualifications, work from those firms, firm size, past projects. to evaluate the proposals that we received. We finalized, we got down to 3 firms, and then we were able to we called 2. We finalized it down to 2. And after that interview process, we settled on, or we're recommending Acuity Research to enter into a contract with. Acuity is a firm that has 26 years of experience. They've completed surveys for neighboring park districts such as Glenview and Wilmette. Local agencies like Lake County Forest Preserve District and closer to home, District 112 in 2017 conducted a reconfiguration survey with Acuity Research. We've called the references, and they are receiving high recommendations. We chose Acuity, or we recommend Acuity because the portfolio of work, the reports that they've provided show actionable outputs. So in addition to just giving the results, they provide recommendations and actionable outputs. They're local and they're familiar with our community. And again, the actionable report was very much, was highly, it was an important thing for the staff. There are 4 steps in our project. We have survey development, that's putting together the survey instrument, survey administration. The questionnaire will be mailed out. There will be a postcard, and then there will be a call afterwards. When it's first sent out, there's 3 options that residents can take to fill out the survey. They can do it by mail, so they'll have the mail survey and then a self-address, or the stamped envelope to mail it back. And then they'll also have a URL so that they can take the survey online, and then there'll be a toll-free number that they can call. So they have 3 options to take the survey. The postcard will be a reminder. And then lastly, the call will be to follow up with any of the sample that were not able to complete the survey. The 3rd step is survey analysis, and then the last step is the final report. There will be 2 presentations to the board, one to present the survey questionnaire, and then a presentation to the board with the final results. We'll be meeting with Commissioners Bernstein and Flores Weisskopf, who are our liaisons through our Greenprint review process, to go through the survey. We'll meet with them throughout this survey development. Are there any questions about the survey or the recommendation of the firm?
I see in the write-up that we're expecting this to be completed by July.
That's right.
Of course.
I think you might have answered my question right near the end. So, Cal, you and Lori so are there the conduits to which we give feedback in terms of what questions would be on the survey? How are those questions formed?
That's a good question. So we'll be working with staff, with the board liaisons, and looking at past Park District surveys to develop the questionnaire. And that final questionnaire will be presented to the whole board.
Okay. And when you send out,
I'll just clarify, before it is sent out. So you'll have the opportunity to review the survey before it's mailed out.
That's great. And do you know the format, is it a situation where it's a price per question? Or do they have some sort of opinion about the number of questions that are asked?
Yeah, there is not a set number. So this firm recommends that he talks about it as a length of time. So there's kind of like a sweet spot. We don't want to, he was saying that we could probably ask a 30-plus minute question if we wanted to get all of our questions in, right? But no one would answer that. So he recommends somewhere between 12 and 15 minutes as the sweet spot. And he'll work with us on the types of questions. So there are some questions that would take longer. So if we were to say, which facilities, or rank the importance of the facilities 1 through 5, and then list all of our facilities. That question might take longer than how long have you lived in Highland Park, and I'm using hypotheticals. So he'll work with us on developing that survey to make sure that the length of time is the right length of time. So it's not a set number of questions.
And do they offer incentives for people to take the survey? Is it just, it's just,
There is not an incentive.
okay, thank you.
Bernie? Yeah. My recollections, the last time we did this, because I was actually here in 2009, is that it was a telephone survey versus a mailing survey. Is that correct? Is my memory correct, or?
It was a mail survey, and then they did a similar approach where they would call those who did not submit the mail.
So some people don't have home phones anymore. So how are we following up with mail surveys with trying to contact them by cell phone?
Yeah, so Acuity talked about that phone surveys are not as successful because people are, looking at their caller ID and not answering unknown calls. So if we do not get the number that the number of surveys we need to get the confidence interval and the margin of error that we've defined in our proposal, then they'll go out for another sample. But there are a number of options for people to submit the survey, so we're hoping to get to reach as many people.
I noticed in the resume that they've done a lot of surveys on the North Shore with other park districts. They did District 112 also. In discussing this issue with them, have they had that problem with the North Shore audience, where they've had difficulties either getting return mail or being able to contact people because people are frankly unplugged and don't have home phones?
So he talked about, well, I'll say that they, when they did their surveys, they did reach their goals. So they were able to accomplish the number that they needed to get the level of reliability. But he did talk about familiarity with our area and certain areas that were kind of known for not returning back surveys, and so that they would oversample those areas. So that was another strong point about this firm, their familiarity with the area and knowing how to be strategic about getting a sample that was demonstrated our demographic, but also where it was successful in getting the number that they needed.
I don't know if this is the right time to ask this question. Maybe it's during the creating the questionnaire. But they talked about trying to compare and contrast the data that's going to be obtained from this survey versus what was done in 2009. Do we have to mirror the same questions as we did before? I know that we're going to have some different questions. The district's changed, the country club, things have happened since 2009. But how do we make sure that this is a worthwhile endeavor to try to compare this to what previous surveys have shown?
Yes, we talked about that, and we included that in our proposal, looking for benchmarking and being able to look at change over time. So they'll work with us to customize questions, but in addition, they will be looking at past park district surveys to identify the questions from past surveys to be able to make a comment on change over time. So we'll be able to identify those questions that we'd like to see that change over time.
So we'll be able to track whether there's been a change of attitudes, interests, or any issues with the community. We'll be able to track the change and the evolution over the last several surveys.
That's right.
Okay. And then with regard to the proposal, is the proposal similar to what we did in 2009? And is the price, we didn't talk about the price, is it competitive? What do we pay? I don't remember what we paid in 2009. So.
Sure. So we paid the $22,500 in 2009, and this year, or the 2019 survey is $29,950. So it's in the same ballpark.
And are we getting anything in addition for the $7,000 that we didn't do last time, or is it basically the same survey? We're just updating and just redoing it.
So I wasn't here in 2009, so I'm
Yes.
not very familiar with the proposal, but I did look at the reports that were completed in 2009, and I can say that some of the differences that you'll see, we will not be using the same exact survey. We will be working with staff to customize the survey for this year, while also using past questions to be able to do that comparison over time. One thing that Acuity does is they recommend a few open-ended questions. So that's something that my recollection and having reviewed, you did not have in 2009, or the district didn't have in 2009. Additionally, the report that Acuity provides, and this is based on reports that they have done for local and park districts from around the area, is more actionable. So the report from 2009 was a listing of results, and there was some analysis. The format of the report that Acuity uses is more actionable and provides more recommendations for us to respond to. So.
That was my next question. Because my next question was going to be what the final product. I assume you reviewed and reports the final work product that they've produced for other districts and school district, and what that end product's going to look like versus what we've seen in the past. So you're saying that there's going to be look similar, but then there'll be more analysis. Is that
There'll
what
be
you're
more
saying?
analysis. So instead of a listing of data, just like percentages, like X% like the Aqua Park, it's
Yeah.
going to give you more cross-tabulation, and so that you can be able to pull something out of that and make some sort of statement about the community and how the district can act upon that and prioritize our efforts to really meet the community's needs, which is the goal of this project.
I will point out to my fellow board members that the 2009 survey was the basis for Greenprint, because that was really where we came up with what we did at the Country Club. For example, my recollection was that 80% respondents wanted more walking trails and bike trails in this community, and that's when we first looked at the Country Club property, which is open what to do with that property. One of the things that we really looked at is improving that with walking trails and bike trails based on what we heard in 2009. In addition, the money that we invested at Rosewood was also as a result of what we heard in 2009, that they wanted some improvements to our swimming beach and to Rosewood specifically. So I look forward to this. This is a very important, exercise for this board to do, and I think it's well-timed to do this, so I fully support moving forward with this.
Commissioner Weisskopf has joined us, and you and Cal are on the task force that's going to participate in the attitude survey. And do you want to ask any questions or make any comments for us now, or not? Okay. And I think it's good that you and Cal are the people, because you're our Greenprint team currently configured, and this will lead us to changes in Greenprint. I have one question. Are we going to make the survey available on our website?
I don't believe so, but I will come back. I'll get back to you. I think there will be a link from our website, but because it's to achieve the statistically valid survey, it goes out to a sample that is randomly selected from another firm. So I'm going to backtrack, and I'm going to say probably not.
Okay.
So there's no stuff in the ballot box.
Right, so we don't want people just because we're trying to get a picture of, or kind of a snapshot of our demographic, it can't be open to everyone, so that we can try to get a reliable picture of our whole community, and not just the people that are visiting our website.
Great. Totally understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're not taking a vote on it at this.
No.
But this is the presentation, next meeting. Okay. Any other questions for Amalia? No? All right. So
Thank
let's-
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. So let's move to the Rosewood Beach update. Jeff Smith and Smith Group to present.
All right, thank you very much. So as the board is aware, due to strong storms and high lake levels, there's been significant erosion at Rosewood Beach. And there's been particular focus on the interpretive cove. Now, this cove is somewhat unique. We do have the outfall of the ravine there, so it has a little bit of a different impact compared to the two swimming coves. Back in December, you will recall that the erosion reached to the bench and boardwalk area in the interpretive cove. In response to that, the Park District worked with Smith Group and John Keno Company to have rocks placed underneath and in front of that area to mitigate further erosion. So separate from this, the Park District has been working with Smith Group to acquire beach nourishment permits, which would be a permit that would allow the Park District to bring in new sand to Rosewood Beach. This permit would be a 10-year permit, so once we acquire it, it gives us the ability over a 10-year period to bring in sand. And so tonight, Margaret Bocek from Smith Group is here to give the board an update on the conditions of Rosewood right now and also provide an update on the permitting process.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you.
Hello again.
Thanks for coming to Madison.
Of course, of course. It was a nice ride down, and thanks for delaying a month so I didn't get stuck here last month with the snowstorm. So much of the presentation on the barge we've already gone through, so I'll go through that one quickly, but we'll start with Rosewood Beach. There we go. So the project team working on both of these projects is myself as project manager, Rob Wright, who you met last time, who was here with me, and then the two behind-the-scenes people is Bill Brose and our structural engineer for the barge project, Khalid Eid. So Rosewood Beach and the beach nourishment, this is a picture taken from the Chicago Tribune. I stole it off the internet, don't tell them. But it does show this park bench here in the interpretive cove, which we will talk about further as well. So these are just pictures taken from Google Earth, pretty simplistic to do, but you can see shortly after construction in 2015, the park was actually constructed during the season in 2014. And then every year after, you can see this shoreline receding back and back and back. A lot of that is due to loss of sand, which is directly related to our water levels, which we'll talk about next. But it looks like from the location of the water in the first picture to today, in 3 years, we've lost about 45 feet of sand from where the water touches the sand. Overall volume for this is a bit over 1,200 cubic yards. Most of that is actually below the water surface, though, and not along the shoreline itself, which we'll get into. So these are the water levels. Those 4 pictures were taken at these 4 little circles, and you can see there's about a difference of 1 foot, which doesn't constitute 45 feet because your slope of your beach is not a 1:45. It is more of about a 1:20. So this does tell us that it has been erosion, that sand has left the cove, and it's not just a flattening process. So these pictures were taken by Jeff back in December last year, and this was shortly after a bit of a storm. You can see there's a bit of a sand scarp here that is indicative of large storms with a good amount of energy and then the waves coming and pulling that sand. There's a reasonable amount of cohesion into the sand. It just means that it's a little wider gradation, which allows it to stand like that. Over time, it does lose its water and will flatten naturally, but most people will choose to go through with some type of rake and actually flatten that out during the beach season. It's a typical process. This is not a cause for concern, but of course this back here is. This is that same bench that we saw in the first picture, and it's becoming undermined. These pictures are a little more close up. Now, fortunately, during construction, they had the foresight to put in a foundation under this bench, which also leads me to think that there's likely a foundation under your boardwalk as well. Sand being an erodible substrate, we plan for this type of thing, that sand will move back and forth and allow itself to open up. And this, of course, means that this structure was not in any immediate danger of failing. But to safeguard against that, we did take some residual stones that were left over from your ravine project, and we're able to place that underneath as a bit of a foundation, and this prevents any further scouring of that beach location and any further undermining of that bench. So this was done back in December 2018. These pictures were actually taken earlier today. What a beautiful day you had down here. Quite hazy up in Madison. But that stone foundation is pretty much still buried underneath some new sand that was placed there. You can still see a steep scarp here. Water levels are lower during the winter, so we do see those down here. But unfortunately, storms are more energetic and therefore cause greater waves. So again, we still see this steep bit of beach that doesn't look very inviting or recreational. Doesn't look a lot of fun. So when we did a 2018 survey as part of our monitoring surveys that we've been doing every year since 2015, we compared that to the post-construction survey and found that this area has actually dropped by a number of feet. We're looking at around 3 to 4 feet of loss in the vertical column at that location.
Where's that location?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is the interpretive cove. You can just make out the building there. Here's
Okay.
The northernmost.
the bench.
Okay, I see, okay.
And then, of course, the breakwaters out here as B1.
So just run past what we've lost here, so that's the interpretive code.
Yep, this is
Okay.
all the interpretive cove, and then this would be the cove south of that.
So you're saying it's lost 3 to 4 feet?
In the vertical column, yes.
What's that mean, the vertical column?
From where it was, it has actually dropped down 3 to 4 feet. It means more sediment has come out and the shoreline has flattened. So this used to be 4 feet higher than it is today,
And when's used to be? When's that?
2015.
So between 2015 to 2018, we've lost 4 feet in that area that's in orange.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's why you see that shoreline retreating back, because that sand is actually dropping down.
Right, sorry.
That's what's happening. Now, you might wonder why this happens. Without doing a full study on this, you do have your outfall location right here, and you can see that there's a significant drop in elevation from 2015, and that's only because if I go back to that first picture, there we go. You can see they actually put sand in that outfall.
That's coming out of the ravine, correct?
Correct.
That's a stream on the ravine, okay.
Correct.
Which is on the
Let's call it
south side of the
ravine.
parking lot.
It is. It's on the
Okay.
south side of the parking lot. This is north is headed in that direction.
Yeah.
And this outfall or river outfall has actually pushed sand out, and that would happen. Anytime you have a very large precipitation event, all that rain gets captured into the ravine, it comes down, and it penetrates through the sand. And you can see it getting bigger and bigger.
Could that have could that have created the issue that we're having in this cove?
It helped creating the issue, because what that is doing is having enough energy to actually push that sand that collects in front of it out and around the
And
breakwaters.
was that a foreseeable event?
It is something that could have been designed for in a better way,
That answers
I
my
will say.
question.
Okay. So, but you also see, of course, that there is loss here. This green means that there's actually buildup. That just means that as a dynamic system, this sand is moving around, and it wants to build up on the south side, but of course then the ravine and the stream there manages to push it back out. So one thing we do want to look at is the forecast for Lake Michigan, and this is the forecast as of yesterday. NOAA and Army Corps of Engineers puts out a forecast that's usually about 6 months in duration. So that is what we're looking at here, which suggests that during this summer, at its peak, we could be anywhere from 0.2 feet below to 1 foot above the high water level from this past year, which generally you can say is going up. So we are forecasted to go to higher water levels this year. We're already at high water levels this year, which means the water can get further into the cove and cause more erosion of the sands. So the question of whether we want to put a good amount of sand in the cove, say if we had the ability to today, this would tell you that there's a likelihood, a very high likelihood, that that sand would be flattened and somewhat lost.
What was the y-axis there? Is that sea level?
Sorry, that is water level for IGLD 85, which is the International Great Lakes Datum. So permitting, of course, with any project can be a concern and can be long and a drawn-out process. We started looking at sand nourishment or beach nourishment back in July 2018, and permits were formally submitted in November to IDNR, Army Corps of Engineers, and through them, the IEPA, Environmental Protection Agency. Now, the Army Corps of Engineers, because they designed this and they were part of the building of it, civil works money has gone into this project, so they require a Section 408, which just means that we're allowed to alter something that they created. The compliance for that, or the completeness of our application was received just a few days ago on March 8th. And within that letter, it said a decision shall be made in 90 days. It's their way of kicking the can. They took more than 90 days to get back to us and then give us 90 days to get an answer. So we still don't have that in hand. The individual permit went out, and we had a public notice as required. That notice actually ends today, so we'll see if there was any comments from the public, and in which case I'll be answering those. And we should have our compliance letter according to our Army Corps of Engineers representative. So the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, not federally funded, works a lot faster because they are state funded. So we put in our application, got notices of receipt right away. We received our first letter from the Coastal Management Program of concurrence of this project. They see no issues, and they said, you're good to go ahead. The Office of Water Resources, they gave us a permit to place sand, so they gave us the all thumbs up on February 14th on Valentine's Day, so that was very nice. And they are all done with their process, and they received their approval from IEPA to do that through the Section 39, which is the Clean Water Act, and that gave them the ability to give us that permit. However, through the Army Corps of Engineers, we also need a Section 401, which is a water quality certification. That is a bit more of a rigorous process that requires an anti-degradation report and so on and so forth. This is all happening behind the scenes that IEPA handles, but they are federally funded and a bit backlogged. When I speak with them, they just told me they are delayed, and their latest communication to me was in an email at the end of February, and they said that we are 21st on the list of the backlog, and because of that, a permit might take an additional 12 to 18 months. Yes, so there is the possibility, though, with IEPA to expedite the process, but that is a bit of a different avenue that we would have to go down and ask for permission, and permits are, the cost of the permits are a bit greater then as well. Were there any questions on Rosewood Beach?
I got a lot.
Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah, do you have any questions?
I have a lot
Why
of
don't you start?
questions. Wait a second. So evidently there's some type of design flaw with this interpretive code. And but to answer your question earlier, this is not the swimming part of the beach. This is the recreation, so the sand would probably be the same problem. I'm guessing here, but yeah. Okay. But focusing on the interpretive center, or the interpretive code.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that you're recommending that we do this sand replenishment, but we can't undertake that for between 12 and 18 months because we cannot get the approvals from the Army Corps because we're number 21 on the list and they're backlogged.
Correct. So the permit is for placement of up to 12,000 cubic yards of new sand material, new clean sand material brought to the site annually. That is what we've asked for in our permit. It does not require that we have to do that much. That little but that is that is the request, and that is what they are reviewing. You are within your right to use whatever sand you have on site. You cannot bring new sand without a permit.
So we can rearrange the decks, the chairs on the deck, so to speak, but we can't bring anything, new chairs on the deck.
Chairs?
I'm thinking of the Titanic right now.
Oh, gotcha.
So,
All right. What's that?
So, because it's
I
sinking, I'm thinking the
sketch.
Titanic, so.
Yes.
But you mentioned earlier there's a design defect with the outflow from the ravine. So are we throwing good money after bad here because we're replenishing the sand, yet we're not remedying the issue that's causing the problem?
Well, the biggest issue that's causing the problem is obviously water levels. It's that there are storms at a higher water level causing greater energy, which is flattening your beach. Now, a repositioning of the beach was going to happen anyway, as with any new construction of a dynamic material such as sand, you're going to see that move around. You're going to see that flatten. The loss of sand from within the cove can be related in part to wave energy and flattening, but can also be exacerbated by this ravine outfall. So whether it's a design flaw, daylighting that ravine has had many positive attributes on habitat and so on and so forth. But a consequence of that is that sediment that ends up within that ravine or within that stream does get pushed out of the cove and therefore is lost into the littoral
So
system.
let's break down the problem into two sections. The first problem we have is high water levels.
Yes.
Okay, so is there anything else we can do except for putting new sand in the beach to try to mitigate the impact of high water levels on the interpretive cove?
Yes, but it would require a structural response.
And that would be Army Corps.
Well, it would be either going back to the Army Corps and having them add in additional structures, or it would be putting in additional structures through another consultancy.
Does the Army Corps, under our agreements with the Army Corps, have any obligations with, I'm not speaking like a warranty issue, but any obligations with regard to the design of this cove to make sure that it's structurally sound, that it's accomplishing its goal of protecting that cove? Because what I'm hearing right now is that 4 or 5 years into this, there's an issue with the design of the breakwaters because they did not anticipate the high lake levels, so therefore we're in this issue. So I guess my point is, has anybody looked at the agreements with the Army Corps to determine do they have any obligations with regard to this?
I guess, Cal, we should look into it, but the question is, the code, it was that there was going to be sand coming in, sand coming out.
Correct.
The placement of the bench is perhaps what the critical issue is to consider. That's not an Army Corps design. But it was designed to open the stream and...
These are two separate issues.
I realize that.
Okay.
I realize that. Their design was with, and Jeff, you can speak more to this, to daylight the stream and to provide the environment of the nature cove, but that, again, was not the primary, it's not the primary swimming cove, and it's very much designed for this type of sand loss. Where we have the bench is a different issue.
Yeah, but I think we need to go back to look at our original documents and see what our agreements with the Army Corps state, because one of the things they were providing shoreline protection. And whether it's the swimming beach or the interpretive code, their job was to design a structure to protect our shoreline. And what I'm hearing today is that even if we bring in sand, we're still not accomplishing our goal of protecting the shoreline, because with high lake levels, that regardless if we bring the sand in, it's somehow, we're still going to have that negative impact on our shoreline. And so I'm not suggesting that we undertake this correction, this repair, but I think we need to diagnose, number one, whose obligation it is. Is it ours? Is it the Army Corps? First of all, we have to find out if they even agree that there's a problem here. Because the Army Corps may come back and say there's no problem. It's, as you're saying, it's functioning the way it's supposed to function, and it's not impacting your swimming beaches. It's impacting the interpretive center, and it's your fault for building the boardwalk where you built it. they may come back and say that, or they may come back and say, yeah, you're right, we should have taken into account the potential for high lake water and high levels of the lake, and therefore, there's a fix to this. I don't know what that is, I'm not a coastal engineer, but I think someone's got to look into that, unless I'm misinterpreting this. Yes?
I had one comment.
Yeah.
Just keep in mind, so all your points are valid, I just want to reiterate that we are seeing somewhat similar sand loss in all three codes. The reason that the interpretive code has been more of a highlight is the infrastructure in that code is closer to the lake than in any of the other codes. And so that's why it's impacted. That boardwalk is closer to the lake there than it is in the other codes. But we are seeing very similar loss in the other two storm areas.
So what does that mean? So how do we address those issues?
So our understanding at this point is the primary factor, which unfortunately we cannot control, is the highway.
Yeah, I get that, okay. Is there nothing else we can do, just to pray for the lake levels to go down?
Well, we are certainly not the only beach along North Shore that has been impacted by this. It's unfortunately something, my understanding once again is that these were designed and are doing what they were designed to do. Unfortunately, the lake levels are extremely high, they're near record levels, and unfortunately, they're continuing to go up.
So have you surveyed our neighbors, are they running into the same issue? What's happening in Lake Forest?
So, speaking of Lake Forest, the impact is different at different beaches. Lake Forest is one that has been impacted by this great community. It has a lot to do with the layout of the beach there. Further north, there's certainly been impacts at other places.
And what about Glencoe going further south?
I can't speak directly to those right now, but I can get back to you on those.
Yeah, can you survey, considering this is a material issue here, a significant issue, can you survey there's not a lot of communities on Lake Michigan and Illinois, so survey their beaches and see how the high lake levels have impacted their beaches? We have 3 other beaches in town. Is this doing the same, are we having the same negative impact of the high lake levels is impacting those other beaches also?
It has impacted them, it's a little different. And the other thing I'd like to add is that regardless of how much we've lost and the impact we've had, if we didn't do the project that was done at Rosewood, one can only imagine that we'd be all the way up to the wall.
I'm not arguing with that. I'm not saying we shouldn't have done the project. I'm just trying to figure out how do we fix it. And so, and I think we'd like to see it, because if some of our neighbors are running into the same issue that we're having here at Rosewood, then maybe we can brainstorm with them and see what they're doing and see how they're addressing the issues, because again, we don't have the monopoly on smarts, so maybe they've come up with something, or they have ideas that we're not really thinking about. So that's number one. I don't know, are you working with any other communities on Lake Michigan?
Lake Michigan, yes. Beach work has been prime for the past at least 2 years because everyone's been receiving the higher water levels after 15 years of low water levels, which allowed dune grass and other vegetation to spread across the beaches. We're now seeing that lost in rapid succession since our historic lows of 2013. So we're getting a lot of calls of people saying, dude, where's my beach? And it's really just because...
Are those residential or are those communities?
Well, we deal mostly with communities due to the consultancy that we do, but we get questions from residences within these communities all the time.
And so what kind of questions, you tell us what kind of questions, what kind of answers are you giving those other communities, similar to what you're telling us tonight?
Well, similar to what I'm telling you tonight, that yes, it is a dynamic system and it's meant to fluctuate back and forth. And your system being brand new also doesn't have the compressed state that some of these others do, that the sand is actually binding together a little bit better, or they've had that ability to shake down and find their happy place and happy slope, where a lot of your material is still, it sounds silly, but kind of fluffy.
So is this still like, we're still settling here?
You are still settling, and you probably will settle for the next 20 years. As this gentleman was mentioning, there's a lot of fines coming out, and that you're noticing people with some dust on them and whatnot. That doesn't happen with older facilities. All that material is already washed out. So we're still in that washing period of everything settling down.
And that can take 20 years?
It can take up to 20 years.
Up to 20 years? Wow.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about issue number 2, which is the stream. Is
Yes.
there any recommendations on how to to mitigate the runoff that stream's causing? Because I've been down there when you have bad rains, and it's like a waterfall coming out of the ravine. So is there anything else that we should be doing there that we're not doing?
There are mitigative strategies that can be employed. It does require changing the shoreline structure a little bit. Possibly, I'm not sure how involved you want to get, but if you were to open up this area that allows the stream to head on out in the other direction, you would also have to place some additional, I know you have a revetted edge, and this is dying, revetted edge here. If you were to extend that revetted edge out, that prevents sediment from migrating into the stream. Those are the changes that would mitigate, but it would not completely solve the issue. Anytime you have a stream, you're introducing new sediments from the upland, but you're also pushing out sediments that end up within its pathway.
So short of modifying the shoreline protection structures, this is going to be a chronic situation that we're going to have to be dealing with every couple of years, or
You will continue to see that stream start to meander and change shape, and just as a stream exiting through any beach is going to do, storms are going to push the, I forget the term of it, the thwap, I think it's called, is the center of the stream. It's going to move it into a different location, and that's just part of the dynamic system.
All right, this is a question for staff. Did we budget for this, or how we handling this?
So we have money in this year's budget for some sand. We also put money in next year, potentially if we were going to do it. And then put a larger amount out, I want to say 2021 or 2022, potentially for more sand.
So at the very least, going forward, we're going to monitor, are we going to do this type of monitoring of the Rosewood Beach to make sure that we're on top of this, since is that what you're recommending going forward?
The monitoring program that you have in place that was required for your permit ends next year. Next year is the last survey. There was only a 5-year survey window, and that completes your requirement with IDNR unless they choose to extend it.
And what do you?
Do you want to speak to the primary focus of that model? While
Yeah.
you're reviewing these codes, or looking more at property usage?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we are looking at a much larger area. This is a small snapshot within a very large monitoring zone, which extends north and south of your project. The purpose of the project was to monitor actually your neighbors.
Yeah, that's what I-
To ensure that there's no shoreline issues that could be caused by the Rosewood.
In my recollection, you found nothing about that. Is that correct?
Sorry?
You found no impact. Rosewood has not negatively impacted any of the residential beaches to the south or to the north.
We have not found any direct correlation between Rosewood and the shoreline issues that are being seen down south, which can't be attributed directly to higher water levels.
Okay. Okay. Barry?
Well, for the people that weren't at your initial presentation, I learned, quite a bit. I think we all did. Do you just want to spend 30 seconds just explaining why the water level's up here in this way in Lake Michigan? What's special about Lake Michigan?
What changes them? What is the
Yeah,
dynamics
well,
of?
you mentioned this bathtub effect, so that was
Yes.
new to me.
Yes, okay, so water levels within Lake Michigan obviously naturally fluctuate. We have a natural fluctuation of about 6 feet, although if you look at a 90 percentile time, we're within a 4 feet measure from a median. We are close to the top of that 4-foot differential at the moment, with only a few years actually back in the 80s exceeding where we are today. So those water levels are affected by precipitation that we get during the summer months and during the spring, and of course the runoff from snow, and that adds to our lake basins. And in the winter, we have evaporation, which just happens when there's ice coverage just on the sides, and of course the sun shining down causes evaporation. The colder the winter is, the more ice coverage, the less ability for evaporation. Our lake levels go up because there is an imbalance then between the precipitation and ice coverage. So those two major factors are what generally will predict where our water levels are going to be. We had a cold winter, we had pretty good ice coverage, and we had a lot of precipitation last year. That all leads up to higher water levels for the year to come. What else? Oh, we also have a regulated lake system between Lake Superior and Lake Michigan. And because of that regulation, the Army Corps of Engineers will release water out of Lake Superior into Lake Michigan, which causes that to go up unnaturally as well. And those, I guess those are the major things. Is that, did I cover what you were
Right.
thinking?
And so my concern is that, given the nature of the climate
Yes.
and what has just been happening local with the weather,
Yes.
that this is going to be an ongoing issue. And whereas there are certain things we can do, those things are going to cost money.
Yes.
And we may have it in our budget, but that may not even handle what we're looking at. And so as a board, I'm just thinking, how does this lay in our priority set?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm concerned with. I mean, you're nodding your head, so you're thinking, yeah,
Well,
we're looking at something here.
I'm not overly concerned about your boardwalk and your benches because they seem to have been built. I wasn't able to get the original drawings to confirm on the boardwalk, but they seem to have their own foundation systems. So as any type of sand starts to erode, we're not in immediate danger of damage or loss to those infrastructure, I guess we can say. The southern beaches, the two to the south, have also experienced erosion of their beaches. A good amount of sand has been pulled out of those cells, but because there's no infrastructure close to the edge, it hasn't been as big of a problem. You still have areas for people to recreate, sunbathe, and swim, and whatnot. So I don't see this as a big concern at the moment, and throwing additional sand at it at this moment is likely not the wisest course of action because we are going to see higher water levels this year. Now, once the water levels are higher, even a small storm brings those waves closer into shore and causes flattening and erosion. So we're just going to see this for a little while. As an aside, since we were talking about higher water levels, there seems to be a cyclic nature of higher water levels that lasts for about 5 years and is on a cyclic cycle of about 21 years. And using that as a prediction, which is not perfect, it is just a statistical approach, we're looking at another 3 years of high water levels before they start to go back down. So if I was a betting person, and I'm not, but I am a math person, that would be my bet, is to hold off, not put as much sand on, really just make these recreational beaches usable, flatten them out. You can pull sand without a permit from your upland and put that on the front face if you really wanted to. And when I say upland, I mean behind the buildings and such. You are within your right to do that. You just can't bring new material. And you can still have a very nice recreational beach for the summer and reassess in the fall whether you want to look into additional sands for next year.
So what's the beach going to look like this year? Jeff, what's it going to look like when the public goes down there when the weather turns nicer?
Do is exactly what Margaret said, that parks will go out there and we'll do the regrading that we can do. Obviously, you had that this cliff there, we'll handle that, and then throughout the summer, if that continues, we'll do as much regrading as possible, lumen if we can, within the limitations that we have.
Unfortunately, we don't have a picture, and I'm sorry to interrupt, we don't have a picture of the swimming beaches. And are we I don't believe we're experiencing the same cliffing effect, are we? I just don't recall.
I can imagine that you are.
We did a little bit.
But more controllable.
You know, it's pretty similar. Once again, the main focus on this code right now is because of the infrastructure. Just having it created like that.
Where's the revetment located? Is that the front of the interpreter we buried? So can you explain what the revetment's going to do? There's people who are like, are we going to lose the building? But we built that revetment there, correct?
No, we're not going to lose the building. The sand's not going to wash away. You've got a security in front of the building.
Great.
It would not be underground.
Okay.
So let me just, I'm sorry, I wanted to ask this other question. The and I was going to say, in the picture that's there, I think it would be helpful. Do we know approximately where the revetment is protecting, how much distance we have from the building? I don't recall what the distance was.
I can speak to it right now, but
Okay.
it's
Right.
specifically don't know.
All right, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. Lori, do you have any questions?
No.
Well, let me ask one more question then. Is there anything that we should consider doing currently to protect the boardwalk and protect that bench that's, design feature? I know that we have the boulders underneath and we put a wall in. It's filled with sand. Is there anything that we should consider doing further than that for this year?
Well, we're comfortable that the structure is sound, and the placement of the boulders is essentially stopping most of that continued erosion. What we will be doing is doing the degrading we can to make certain that it's as safe as possible. So that
Mhm.
this is going to be
Okay. Any more questions? Yes. We'll take a question from the audience.
If we're free to use the upland sand, which I think is not a good idea from the block, are we free to dredge and replenish from the lake?
No. Anything lakeward of the ordinary high water mark is lands of the state. So you do not actually own it, even though it's within your cove. So it's hard to tell, of course, where the ordinary high water mark is now, but assume that if you're touching water, you're within it.
Getting a permit every year for the launch ramp area for dredging has been frustrating, but not impossible. Would that same situation here in your estimation?
For
You wanted to dredge?
Well,
Dredge sand?
I would suggest against dredging, because what you're actually doing is creating deeper water then right in front of your shoreline, which of course creates a pocket, and if you've ever been to the ocean, a wave passes and it fills in whatever hole your footprint has just left behind. So what we're going to see is that hole want to recharge with sand as quickly as possible. Now, if you're talking about going even further offshore and mining material, that's of course a bit different because that won't fill in, and you could bring that ashore. I've never seen a project like that done. I have seen beneficial reuse of dredge material, such as from boat launches and other harbors that have too much sediment and try to get that out. And that might be an ability that if you're dredging one area, you might be able to reuse it at another area, but it would have to go through the rigorous process of all of the qualifications that it's clean and healthy, and I'm sure you do that.
All that sand to the south.
Well, why don't we come to that? This is really getting beyond, I think, what we want to talk about on this project right now. So,
I can add
Yeah.
to that, is that, so that suggestion is actually something that we looked into when we then made the determination that the best fit for this site was to do a beach nourishment permit. And I will speak briefly, the Lake Bluff, for example, was one of the districts that we've spoken to, and they had the same thing, a 10-year permit. And to kind of go back a little bit to what the board was talking about, it's almost a philosophical difference. In some areas, like Lake Bluff, we talked to them, and they do actually bring sand in every year, but they made very upfront that at times the sand they brought in could have been washed out once it was gone. And so, from what we understand, a lot of those, for the most part, if people are replenishing their beach, they're doing it by 10 acres.
sure.
So we're not going to do anything this year because we don't have a permit, but this is really talking about 2020.
Yeah, long term, once again, regardless of when we get the permit, it'll last for a 10-year period. Just like the dredging permit, we had the Park Avenue with a 10-year.
Got it.
All right, so,
So you won't be asking us to be doing anything short-term on this. So what's the next step? What are we doing next?
So right now, the goal was to provide an update, follow up from what we had to do in December. We will be doing what we can with our meeting, which is degrading, and then we'll certainly be revisiting this when we get closer to next spring as to whether or not we have the ability and we want to put and sand. Margaret, could you speak to the best time of year to actually replenish the beach if you chose to do it?
Yes, so your summer season, of course, is your calmest season. We see storms significantly drop off after the end of April. This is not an absolute. You will receive the occasional rogue storms in August and in July, but statistically speaking, it's much lower toward the end of May and throughout the summer. So if we were going to place sands, we would want to do that after the beach is unfrozen. I'm guessing down here that's probably by the end of March. So we're looking between March and the end of May. In my recommendation, that would be closer to the end of May. So if you started at the beginning of May, regraded by the end, you're open for Memorial Day weekend.
And how do you bring the sand, barge it in, or do you truck it in?
You can truck it in. Yep. We've already spoken to your local supplier who supplied the sand that you have right now. They looked into the site and said they could truck it in.
Is there any issues with the city? I know last time we did that, we had to do some coordination with the city regarding bringing in the truck, so that's something. Okay, that's fine.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess we're going to stay with Margaret to talk about Park Avenue.
Yes. So, let's go back. There we go. So some of this presentation is the same as I presented 2-3 months ago now, something like that. So I'll go over those slides very quickly. But this is, of course, the barge that we're talking about. Again, thank you, Chicago Tribune, for the wonderful picture. I appreciate it. And apparently, of course, as you know, at one time it was a usable platform with seating and a bit of a public amenity. So we were able to look at the drawings from 1981 and 82 to determine that this is a old barge, essentially, that was retrofitted to become a bit of a groin or a breakwater, whatever you like to call it. It unfortunately, though, was filled with what they called dredgings, which, as you know, in this area is sand and a little bit of rock. So once the wall on one side started to break open, all of that small material was able to leach out, and now you have what you see today, which is a broken top. There it is. So this is, again, Google Earth images, and the two things that I want to point out in this image is that when we even had low water, which exposed the scour protection, which is in front of the barge, you can see a wet surface. So we do have a bit of overtopping happening that was causing water to end up on top. This, of course, was when it already started to break open, but you can see that water was impacting the top of the barge as well. So it just gives us an idea that the barge existing top elevation is a little on the low side for safety. This is the more recent picture that Google Earth had. I haven't been able to see it since that time, but I understand from Jeff that it continues to unfurl on the front end and continue to break. However, last year we did do a site inspection, and at that time we determined that the lee side wall, which is here, was actually in pretty good condition. We couldn't see anything below the mud line. We did dive, and while we saw some hairline fractures and faults, there was nothing large to indicate that there was any immediate failure of the back wall. So of course the front wall is completely, not completely, majority is broken down, which is of course causing all that dredge material that was inside the box to be lifted out. The barge is not in great shape. It is probably was constructed in the 70s, so we're seeing just a good amount of degradation that we would imagine, because a barge can only really realistically last for about 40 years. So these are the site conditions, just letting you know that all of your waves, not all, most of your waves are coming from the north or northeast. This is causing a bit of migration of sands around the tip of your barge and into your boat launch area. Your winds are in different directions. Oh, and here, look at this. This is the waves. You can see that they're lower from May through September. So just prove my point on the last one. Okay, so we did 2 borings in the area and determined that below all this wonderful concrete and such is some silt and clay and sand. It's typical for the region, and it means that you can pretty much install sheet pile, any type of heavy structure. There won't be too many issues with settling or degradation over time, so that's good. So these were the concept designs. There is the do-nothing approach, which of course is just to leave it in place and allow it to start to degrade naturally. There is a sheet pile adjacent to the boat launch. So what we see is that even if this back wall were to start to fail, those waves would not penetrate into this beach, causing that beach to change. This beach is actually shaped based off of the tip of this barge, and that tip is in pretty good condition and not failing at the moment. So your beach is fine, but of course your boat launch is a little bit at risk from future failure of the backside of the barge. I guess that's everything there. Okay, so concept number one was encapsulation of the barge itself, was placing sheet pile around the entire thing, essentially making a bigger structure. This is going to take a good amount of time, 8 to 10 weeks for construction, but permitting would take about 6 to 8 months. It's sheet pile, it's low impact to the ground, so it's actually a shorter permitting season than if you had something like rubble. So the OPCC on that, which is the opinion of probable construction cost, is about $1.6 million, but it'll give you about 70 years of service life. And that's really just leaving the existing barge in place, which is nice, because you don't have to pay to get rid of it. Another idea, concept number two, is bringing in a brand new barge, which we looked up costs of barges in the area. This ultimately also wasn't too inexpensive, though, at $1.3 million. And again, we mentioned that the service life of a barge is only about 40 years. So accounting for its number of years already, that meant your service life was much lower at about 34 years. Concept three was a cellular sheet pile. This is creating a much smaller box. It does require getting rid of the existing barge, the dilapidated barge, installing this concrete box, and putting some armor stone in front of it. This is to dampen wave energy and reduce the run-up up over the top. This does have a beneficial use, though, as access onto a floating dock that can be placed onto the lee side, which showed up in a number of the opinions of probable cost. This is still $1.4 million, but because it is sheet pile, it was coming in at about a 70-year service life, which is much longer than most of the people in this room would care to see. So, concept number four, this is the last option that I presented last time. This is just emptying off the broken up concrete that's on the top and actually filling the box with rock, reestablishing it as a solid structure, placing some H piles with a cap along the back side to brace that back wall, because right now this wall is acting as a cantilever. It just means it's getting force from one side and not the other, and over time that's going to start to fail just from fatigue and constant motion. These barges were not made or built or designed to act in such a capacity. So that's where the H piles on the backside come in. This construction window was 6 to 9 weeks and could be done by land or water. The permitting is still 3 to 4 months, but again, the sheet pile is much easier to permit, and the rocks being within its current footprint didn't actually add to any difficulty with water quality, so we could avoid those additional permits. The construction cost on this was about $550,000, and the service life on this is only about 20 years, 20 plus years, because the failure mechanism, which is this backside wall, still exists. We don't know enough about the barge to give it an actual estimate to say how long it's going to continue to function. But we've done our job, our due diligence, by placing a brace along the backside and reducing wave energy from passing through the barge. So expanding upon those options, we looked at other rubble options, because rubble is a lot cheaper than steel, especially currently with existing tariffs on steel. So we looked at a breakwater structure, a rubble structure, The only problems with rubble structures is because they are porous, they let wave energy through. So to reduce or eliminate that energy, we had to place some type of solid core. So this first one is a breakwater with a sheet pile, just a singular long sheet pile driven down the middle. There is a cost savings associated with this of about, it costs about $850,000. The reason for the service life of about 50 years is it's rock. It's allowed to move. Rocks also have a tendency, if not of high quality, they could break down. So there is some minor maintenance involved with that. But breakwaters from the Roman times still exist today. So this is about 50 years is what we feel comfortable saying this is its service life, but it could actually function for a lot longer than that. I don't know where I'm pointing. This is the sixth option, which is raising the core. The core is your most valuable part of a breakwater. It is what resists that wave energy and penetration to go through. So in fact, all you see is the large stone on the outside of a breakwater, but the money really is the center part, which is just a really dense graded base of about 4 inches. In any matter, that crest is raised to the high water level, which means it's going to protect you 80% of the time from having waves actually pass through. And then what actually does pass through at the high water level is mitigated to a manageable amount to allow you to continue to use your boat launch for many years. There is an optional H-pile. These are just singular piles that are set out there to allow for, again, a floating dock. That is not a necessity. You already have a boarding dock on one side, but that would be how to get one on the opposite side as well. This could be a walking feature. A walkway can be placed on top of this. It would require a bit of stairs or a ramp up onto it. This is precast walkway. These are our simple precast L units. You can just see them here. And what we came up with was placing those along a shallow breakwater, a shallow core, filling that with additional core material and placing a walkway on top of that. Because it is a low elevation, we did put a railing on the backside for safety purposes, because you don't want a person falling off and onto rock. That would be bad. And again, the riprap is placed on the front side to dampen wave energy and reduce any type of overtopping effects. That is costing in at $830. If I'm going too fast, let me know. And the last option we came up with, concept number 8, is a non-usable surface. Obviously, this is just a sheet pile that is acting as a cantilever wall. It's not very pretty. It is a tall wall. Besides, the top elevation is actually higher than the other options because as a vertical structure, when waves hit it, they jettison up in the air. And this allows for overtopping on the backside and unsuspecting victims who might be on a floating dock or within their boat on the backside. So the elevation of that wall actually had to increase. Now, because it is a cantilever wall, to get away from putting in very robust sheets, we added a stiffening system, which looks a bit like this, H-pile, that are braced into the backside of this, and that stiffens the whole sheet. But those H-piles also provide some connection points for an additional floating dock. Now, again, this is steel, so the cost goes back up at about $1.1 million. But again, you're getting that additional service life of about 70 years. Steel is not the prettiest thing to look at, though, so aesthetically speaking, that might not be the best option. But it will provide you a nice, tranquil environment for your boat launch. So, permitting. This is something we touched on last time. Any placement of material into the water is going to require a permit. Some of this can be done through a nationwide permit or within what's called a maintenance permit of the structure you have. Other things, anything that requires removal of that barge and a brand new system is, of course, an individual permit, which requires a longer review period. So we would again have to deal with the Army Corps of Engineers, the IDNR, and the IEPA on these permits. That would likely take a number of months, if not over a year. And so this is just a summary of those options. Now, I did add in an option here. We talked about the rubble fill with H-piles. There was the question mark of whether we could just put in the H-piles, no rubble fill, no concrete cap, to essentially brace that back wall. Now, that is always an option, and it will provide some measure of resistance on that back wall and will extend the life of that back wall, but not having a good understanding of the residual time that is left on the back side of that wall, it is hard to say how long it will actually affect the system. So I did put in that doing something like that would give you about 8 to 10 years of additional life, and that is with leaving the rest of the system in place. So it's just really a brace on the backside wall and trying to extend your existing system as long as you can. That, of course, is the cheapest option, as it requires only a number of piles along the backside. And permitting for that would, of course, be, would generally be a lot shorter, as it's a minimally invasive treatment. I guess I got through that pretty fast. Is there any questions?
Well, do we have any questions?
It's a thrilling topic, I know.
It's important.
It's important.
I have a question.
Yes.
In your report, it says, where waves within the basin are greater than 5 inches, run the risk of damaging the bottom of vessels.
Yes.
Can you explain what that means?
Sure. So when you're putting your vessel onto the trailer to bring it on out, you do not want more than 5 inches of agitation within that basin, because that boat going up and down is going to slam into your trailer. And the hull of the ship is just not designed to sustain such impact loads.
So that's the purpose of the breakwater, is to prohibit that from happening.
Correct, to reduce the agitation. And we have to, because it's public use, we assume that if water level and agitation is of higher than 5 inches, a person's going to get there and say, I'm not launching, it's a little too dangerous. But our aim as designers is to minimize the amount of downtime by using that threshold of 5 inches.
So is it currently, as the breakwater, I'm calling it breakwater several times, but
Sure.
the breakwater currently exists, is it providing that use? Is it providing that 5 inches, is it mitigating that 5 inches that would create an issue with vessels?
Yes, not all the time, obviously.
Obviously with big storms.
Correct.
And who
in big
monitors that?
storms.
How do we determine whether whether the break, if it's open or closed? That's really determines whether it's open or closed.
Primarily what happens, Cal, if the wind's coming from the southeast, that's when you're going to get waves coming into
The launch.
area. And typically, if there's really waves coming into the launch area, people aren't launching because it's just too rough outside.
Do we close it, or does just people?
No,
with
it's
that common sense?
self-regulated.
Oh, self-regulated? Okay.
So, thank you.
You're
Thank you very much.
We,
You're welcome.
Yes? I'm sorry?
We have a few people who signed in to speak.
Yes, I was going to ask. We have people who've asked to speak, and should we call them by name? Please come up to the the microphone, state your name and your address, please.
Yep, the first one is Laurent Purnell. So we did lose a couple.
Yeah.
Okay. Mariah Hammond.
You're yielding your time? Is that what's happening here? Okay. Okay. This is like the Michael Cohen.
Yeah, exactly.
No one's going to yell at anybody.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've said this. I'm David Sogan. I live at 1092 Wade, Highland Park. What I'd like to start out with is comments that requirements that I sent to all the board members, and I know some of you have looked at it, not everyone in this room has heard it, but I think what's important when doing a project like this is one of the things that you should do is look at what are the critical user requirements. And I have 4 here. One of them is that the structure should provide protection from 3-foot wave action during boat launching. And I'm really thinking in terms of waves on the other side of the structure, and as Margaret points out, 5 inches. The east side of the ramp is used for retrieval and requires access of pedestrians within about 3 feet of the water. A dock, a ledge, floating dock, some sort of dockage. It doesn't do us much good to just have an open, a retrieval area that doesn't allow people to get on shore to help bring the boat in. Third, the Park District needs access. Minimum maintenance, planned maintenance should also be included, and long-term maintenance should be included in any future cost concepts and consideration. So as Margaret was pointing out, is that some of these rubble piles require maintenance. She haven't, provided estimates of what those cost and how frequently that will have to be done, but it's probably not going to be cheap after 2 or 3 years. Look what's happened at Rosewood. Fourth, the site should be safe. One of the issues we talked about, especially Commissioner Wyckoff just brought up, is that the rubble piles provide an attractive nuisance for people to climb over. And I know growing up in Chicago, we had breakwaters that we used to climb all over, and they really are attractive nuisances. So the site should be safe. I think those are the critical ones, but I think there are additional requirements that should be considered. A ladder, if a walkway is more than 3 foot away from the water level. Anglers should have access for casting into the lake. That's might be hard to do over a rubber pile. Lake observers should have bench seating. Railings where appropriate with adequate anchoring for the vertical poles. One of the design flaws, as trivial as it may seem, on the current barge, it was only 4 inches of concrete, and when the Park District wanted to put up posts for fencing, there wasn't enough concrete for them to put a post into. Should we have minimal navigational hazards, electrical power, and definitely plan dockage on the retrieval side so you can retrieve a boat. Margaret's often talked about floating docks. Before Eliza left, I had a sit-down session with her, and one of the suggestions I had for her to look at is to look at docks that could be installed on that side that could be adjusted and fixed to the structure and adjusted from one season to another. And I've provided a website that has, they mostly make brackets for docks to be supported on rocks, but these could be adequately modified so that one could have a dock that would be more stable and would adjust and to whatever the conditions were for that particular season. With that said, I think these are, these requirements should be thought out very carefully as we, as you make a decision.
Thank you. Are you Maureen, are you reclaiming any of your time?
I just have one question. I'm with the commercial restaurant. Given the fact that we're, now we sort of postpone this discussion for a few months, what is the time frame like for, making a decision, selecting a solution and moving forward with permitting? Are we still looking at, completing one of these projects by beginning of 2020, or are we looking at next year, or just trying to get an idea so that we can plan what's going on with our operation?
Okay. Before we answer any questions, is there more speakers?
Oh, yep. Peter Mordini.
Peter Mordini, I live at 1853 Sheen Court, Highland Park. I guess I just put myself in the board's, seat and what makes sense the most. And it's my opinion, the most, least maintenance is number 3, the cellular sheet piling, because you get your best of both worlds, no maintenance and 70 years, and these other ones, you have to continually put money into them, which no one wants to do, even a taxpayer. It's just my opinion. I think number 3 is great, and also you get the public who can actually utilize the top of it for sitting and walking and fishing. Seems to be the strongest. Yeah, it's a little more expensive, but hopefully with all this development in Highland Park, I've seen these spreadsheets of, the bigger developments of apartments and townhomes. I've seen that the Park District is gaining big chunks of money out of that, and from what I've seen on the paperwork. So with all this added development in Highland Park, we were seeing future money for the Park District, just to throw that out there. And that's about it, I mean, 3 is my opinion. If they can swing it, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
That's it.
That's it? All right. Do we have any comments or questions from the board?
Was there anybody else who didn't sign up for this?
No, that's it.
Oh, that's it? Okay.
Cal, do you have any questions that you want to ask or things?
Actually, I have one question. Going to do nothing, does the sailing beach and the yacht club still be able to operate without any disruption?
Until you lose.
Yeah, it's not exactly true because we're down a lane. Right, that used to be a two-way ramp.
I'm sorry, the ramp.
But the yacht club, I mean, they could do sunfish, they could do whatever, they could still launch all that without, because any sailboat that doesn't need the boat launch, they can do that. They can use that.
We cannot operate our programs without the support of power boats that require a boat launch.
Okay. Does Lake Bluff have a boat launch?
No.
Yes, I believe it is.
I know they have sunfish and things like that, but they do launch that. Do they have a boat launch also?
Their sailing area
Yeah.
does not have an immediate boat launch. Their support craft are launched off the beach, as are ours, with the interesting observation that they call a very major regatta last year, and none of their support craft were running the use of it.
And they did not run that event at their beach, they held it in Waukegan.
Okay, but you could still launch sunfish and stuff like that without a boat launch.
The question is, can you launch support craft to go out there and make sure
That was not my question. My question was, can we launch sunfish and things without a boat launch?
They can be launched.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Terry? Lori? No? Oh, I'm sorry. Chad?
Nobody's mentioned the need for the ramp for the police and fire department. That was a point that was made up early in this process, and they do want to have access to a ramp for emergency situations.
Okay, we'll make a note of that. Thank you. Well, I would like to ask staff to review the options and prepare an economic analysis for us based upon the factors of usage, the cost, what our fees are there, looking at the various options to give us some more input so that we can make a decision as to an option that seems optimal for the Park District. You want to add anything to that?
Yeah, if there's any opportunities, if we did any of these 1 through 8 of these options, is there any return on investment?
Well, that's what I was kind of getting to, without using those words.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. This is, we're getting closer to something. We'll now move on to review of vouchers.
The bills presented for the board's review on March 12th are transferred from February 22nd to March 7th. They were included in your board packet. They total $597,242.
And I should note, and I reviewed them, I should note that that included the purchase of 2 vehicles. So that's why we have a little bit larger number. All right. We are now open to the public to address the board on any other topic. Yes.
When will the cost analysis be performed for the update with the barge? Will it be the next meeting? Will we discuss that?
Perhaps a meeting after that. I know the staff has a pile of things to catch up on.
Our next meeting is next week.
No, I don't know about that.
Is it?
I'm not sure.
It is next week. So
It's scheduled for next
We
week.
have a meeting scheduled for next week, so it won't be at next week's meeting. So probably sometime in April or May, I'm assuming.
Okay. All right. Nobody from the public? Then
Thanks for coming down.
thank you all. And
We have to go into closed session.
And those who left.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a motion to go into closed session pursuant to the following sections of the Open Meetings Act? Section 2C1, 2C5, 2C6, 2C8, 2C11, 2C21, 2C29. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
The motion was by Cal, the second was by Terry. All right, please call the roll.
Commissioner Bernstein?
Aye.
Commissioner Flores Westcott? Commissioner Grossberg?
Aye.
And Vice President Ruttenberg?
Aye. So we are going into closed session at 7:40 something. 7:38.
7:40.
7:38.